Friends, you and I are car guys. We get excited about horsepower, sheet metal, and engine gains. But today, well, we're going in a bit of a different direction. We need to get excited about high tech from the folks in Silicon Valley, wrapped in curves from the folks, well, von Ingolstadt. So have you ever experienced deja vu before? Well, you best belt in because we're going to experience it together again, and that's with this engine. We've seen it before. We've seen it in the Volkswagen GTI with the Sport Pack. We've seen it in the A3, and here it is again. So what is the engine? Well, it's a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder direct injected turbocharged gas unit, and here the output is very much the same as we've seen before. It is 220 horsepower, which comes in at 4,500 RPM, stays flat all the way to 6,200 RPM, and 258 pound-feet of torque, which comes in at a very low 1,600 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 4,200 RPM. Now that is in the TT, but there is a TTS, and that puts out more power, but once again, deja vu. Remember the Golf R and the Audi S3? Well, that's kind of the same thing here, but this is where it gets kind of confusing because that is also a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder direct injected turbocharged gas engine, but there, or in the TTS, it puts out 292 horsepower, which comes in at 5,400 RPM, and 280 pound-feet of torque, which comes in at a very low 1,900 RPM. But really, how does the change come about? Because the compression ratio is actually lower over on the higher horsepower unit, but they do change the turbocharger. We spent some time talking about that in the Golf R episode, so make sure you check that out. But really, this model, how does this all translate to the road with 220 horsepower? I've been at this thing for now, I want to say a little over a week, and both around places like this as well as in town, but it's still not like a full-on sports car with this engine in it. Or actually, in the GTI, that thing is a pisser with this engine, especially with a manual transmission. Now, yes, we can manually shift the gears here with the paddles. This is the DSG. Granted, in Audi they call it S-tronic, but same dual clutch system. So let's try it. Let's downshift to 3, see if we can get some more power out of it. And yeah, it works okay, but I gotta be honest with you, this transmission is so good in sport mode, it's almost kind of a letdown. Actually, well, off camera there. Yes, it works, you can shift the gears, but it's not at all fulfilling, especially after you've come out of a GTI and you see how great this engine can be with a manual transmission. And if I'm really being honest here, I don't think Audi would get as many people driving these or really buying these things. I think people buy these things more for style. So, you know, maybe there's the TTRS that's coming up. Would love to see that with a manual. That would be totally cool. Please, oh please, oh please, manual on a TTRS. But we'll come back to that. So now we need to get back to a bit of alphabet soup, specifically MQB and TT, and how does it all affect driving dynamics. In the front, it's really no surprise, you've got McPherson struts. In the rear, it's a 4-link unit combined with the rear drive system of the Quattro. But then the real big part of MQB here is the subframes. They are aluminum. And then there are the brakes. The front is 12.3-inch rotors, the rear 11.8. Now, you're looking at this car, and it looks very fancy, but if you were to roll into an Audi store and not check any option boxes, you would roll out with 18-inch wheels. This one has a Sport Pack, so it's rolling on 19s. Now, we did already kind of discuss that TTS, and we do need to get that car and drive it, because anything with 72 more horsepower over a car that has 200 some odd horsepower, that's a huge percentage difference. We want to drive that, but there is still another difference between this and a TTS, in that the TTS, that changes out the dampers and it has magnetic ride control. But let's put aside the TTS, because this is what we got here today. How does all of this alphabet soup affect driving dynamics out here? We are driving about 3,186 pounds. So overall, this is a light car in today's day and age. Let's put this into perspective. A 911 is like 3,300 pounds. A Corvette's about 3,200 pounds. So here we are. Yes, we got a little bit less power, but it's almost 3,000 pounds, which when you consider all of this like safety stuff that's in these cars nowadays, frankly, cars that are designed by Nancy Pelosi et al., that is amazing that this thing is only 3,100 pounds. And as such, huge impact on the driving dynamics of this thing. Like now you got 220 horsepower, doesn't sound like a lot. 200 about 60 pound-feet of torque, that's seriously respectable. But when you put that all together with this weight, there's not a point where you feel like, oh my God, I'm going to go off in those trees. There isn't a huge amount of lean here. Like there's a little, I mean, just a wee bit of body roll in the back there. Like it comes in on itself just on the side, the outside. Now the road's gonna start to get a little bit more technical, so let's try this again. We got a little bit of speed here. We're going around a turn, and you know, it's not neutral handling. Definitely not. You're not driving a GT3. And you know, I'm gonna give credit where credit is due. It isn't some marketing mumbo jumbo. The way in which they've approached developing this platform, meaning its pieces, its tools, it's not an entire platform. That's given Audi the ability to tune this thing, frankly, like a proper car. So I will admit, perhaps I went a bit overboard in stating the importance of this interior in the tech review. So today, a how-to. And we're going to focus on 5 areas. There's this down here, then there's the toggle switches, and then there's the vents. But not just the vents here, the outboard positions as well. Then number 4 is the screen, and number 5, and probably the most important, are the steering wheel controls. So let's focus on what we know from previous Audis, and that's this MMI, and we saw this in the A3. So it's got toggle switches instead of buttons around the scroll wheel for the 4 main applications. But this one is fitted with a trackpad on the top of the scroll wheel, so you can literally write in your entries for navigation and telephone. Very cool little touch. Now let's press on to the toggle switches. And this is kind of like a modern German interpretation of like the toggle switches in a 61 E-Type. And granted, they do different things. They don't turn on a map light anymore. Like, for example, the drive select system is over here, or turn on and off the traction control, or raise and lower the spoiler here. There are 2 blanks in this one, obviously, for things that can be fitted optionally. Now getting into some more exciting stuff, and that is the vents. Did you guys see our 2016 Camaro episode? This is kind of a similar execution here, but with much more finesse. So if I want to just switch on and off the vents, they're down here, right here. And then there are buttons in between the vents for the rear defroster and the front defroster. But then you would think like these like gloss black or piano black finish things here are just like a nice decorative touch. Actually, they are buttons. So like, for example, do you want to turn on and off the compressor? You press this button. If you want to turn on and off like the HVAC system, just go auto completely, just hit this thing here, okay? But notice the fan starts to kick on. You can manually adjust the fan here because these are knobs as well. And then this obviously turns on and off the recirculate. Now, on the outboard position, I'm not going to reach all the way over there, this is the heated seat button. So over here, this is for the right, and that's the one for the left. Now, I think this is incredibly elegant design, and that's what I said with the Camaro. And here, by putting these buttons, like a button and a knob as part of the fan, this is genius. Anyway, let's press on to the screen. Now, Audi calls this Virtual Cockpit, and there's a couple of different things that can be done here, and this is where we get into the controls on the steering wheel. So in previous Audis, you can scroll between applications on the main screen over here with this button here. So you can go through like telephone, music, information, trip computer, that kind of stuff, right? Now, remember how MMI has the 4 main applications, but it's got the smart buttons over here. Well, here's, I think, one of the biggest changes with the steering wheel. You can now hit the smart button on either side of this button here. So let's go to, like, for example, let's go back over to the map, and now I've got it set up as full screen. I can pull the right menu, or left menu, I should say, here, and the right menu here. And this all while you're driving. Now notice it's got a full map screen here, and I've got the gauges, so the tachometer and the speedometer minimized. You can change the view just by hitting the view button. You don't get this until you start driving this car and start looking down on the maps of where you're going. This, genius. Although I do have to say, I'm gonna give you guys a bonus question here. Notice there's no pop-up screen here like in the A3. I personally think this is significantly better than having a pop-up screen here. But, you know, let me know. Is this something you would miss, a pop-up screen? Let me know in the comments below or via social media. Think of that as a bonus question. And then, now let's go over to like another function. Let's go to radio. And now we go over to this button here, which is kind of the same functionality of this button, but instead you can scroll through your radio channels here, presets or whatever, and then the volume here. Now, I will admit, setting the presets, it's a very clunky, very like hard to enter process. That, I would argue, needs to be changed significantly. But anyway, I digress. You got a back button here, so you can kind of get out anything you want, and you can scroll through all of your presets here, and it gives you like a bit of like a preview of what's playing. Actually, we're not going to listen to Kelly Clarkson. How about we listen to Pearl Jam radio? And I can't clear that, so I'm going to make sure I keep the volume down. Anyway, this is all fine and cool as we sit here and I show you how this thing works. But really, how does this use case transition to driving the car on a daily basis? We're starting out in the navigation mode, and I've got this virtual cockpit with the full view of the map. And I love the graphics of this. Now granted, you're seeing a Google map here, so when the car starts up, just like other Audis, it starts with a regular, normal map, and then as it gets signal, it starts to download the Google information, so you're actually getting a full view, a satellite view. Now I can change this view here with this button here, as we talked about, the view button, and notice the gauges now, instead of them being minimized, now the gauges are full size like you would get in like any other Audi, but now the map is in the center. But that center is not just a map. Think of that as like a smart screen or a screen in which you can change whatever information you want. So this button here, we can page through from the map to the telephone, to the radio, to the trip computer. So let's go back to the phone, and this is where we're going to start playing around with stuff over here. So let's say, for the sake of discussion, I want to call, let's call Billy. So I can literally, don't try this at home, you can draw the B, and now I've got a couple of different contacts that come up with a B. But then I can scroll through all of my different numbers. Now granted, this is showing me my most recent calls, but that can be pretty much anything you want if you go to the full view of the telephone menu. And the same thing really applies to the radio. So this is showing me my presets. Now remember, we talked about the soft button where it's got the menu on either the left side or the right side. So there is the menu control here and here, but there's also a menu control button on the steering wheel, and this is kind of the genius of the whole thing. So this button here, if I click on the left, it pulls up the left menu. If I click on the left again, it goes back to the regular. Oh, look at this old 356. Oh my God, that was stunning. I think it's funny we're talking about new tech and this stunning classic 356 Roadster just passes us. Anyway, back to soft buttons. So then we can go over to the right menu by hitting the right side of the left button. You see the genius of this? Look at this. I'm driving. I'm not missing a beat of my driving, and I'm able to do this intuitively. Granted, I'm doing this slower to explain it to you guys, but once you get this, in the acclimation process, it's like 5 minutes. Once you get this, this is the most intuitive, like, interaction of steering wheel buttons and UX from a car manufacturer I have seen, full stop. So in summary, what do we got? Well, we need to separate this discussion into two parts. There's the whole sporty car thing, and there's this, what the kids call UX nowadays. So, being this as a car, let's start with the whole sporty car thing. Now, if we're being honest, I don't think anybody would accuse previous TTs of being like hardcore sports cars, and that's because they had significant limitations. They were based on front-wheel drive platforms. But now things are very different because now you have this MQB, Kerverkausten toolkit, whatever the hell Volkswagen Group calls it. It basically gives more tuning abilities to the different groups within the Volkswagen Group, Audi in this case, to make more of their own car. And basically what they've made is more of a sports car. Now, granted, is it a full-on sports car? No. But what it is kind of like a sports car light. And at the end of the day, it is highly respectable on roads like these. Now, let's put this off to the side, because I know in the tech review I kind of waxed on poetically about this whole UX thing, because I would argue that is the much bigger deal here. But at the end of the day, this is still a car, so you are still looking at the dashboard, the interior of it. And I would argue that Mercedes is still very much on top of like the heap of the interior game from a fit and finish point of view. But when it comes to the interaction, actually using the infotainment bits, and this is putting aside like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, this light years ahead. I mean, just light years ahead. Something to the point where you got to go and check this out yourself to really understand how big of a difference it is. So with that, I need to leave you guys with a question, because we've got a step up in performance and just a leap forward in terms of interaction and general design of the interior, but we still have a major problem, and that is 50 grand. And for 50 grand, there are a lot of options. Like, there are many other sports cars you can buy that are rear drive based, maybe even more power, and you could buy a muscle car, or really the elephant in the room is, for the same kind of money, you could get double the horsepower in a Corvette. Granted, very different, but double the horsepower. So I'm gonna turn this question around to you guys, and it's really this: what would you choose between a TT, or you know what, forget about a TT. If you had 50,000 US to spend, or whatever that is, in your region of the world, what would you buy? Would it be a TT? Would it be a Corvette? Would it be the nicest Camaro you could currently get? Or would it be one hell of a Mustang? Let me know in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you know what? Don't just let me know which one you would choose, let me know why you would choose it, and what you currently drive, and what region of the world you live in. Now, with that, I want to leave you with two things. Number one, make sure you download our very fancy new application, which I am very proud of the UX design on, because I had a huge hand in it. And number two, this is now season 6, and on season 6 we have something very exciting coming up for you, and that is a mini-series. We're gonna spend some more time sharing details of the coming mini-series, but let's just say I guess it's a little bit UX, but it's a lot more old world. And until then, bis später.